Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to our speaker for today, Encik Mohammad Abdul Hamid. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone here who has joined us. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar today. We appreciate your presence. The webinar today is part of a series of webinars organized by MPC, focusing on Malaysia's competitiveness, performance, and ranking. It is evaluated and reported every year by international organizations. Two of these organizations are IMD and WEF. IMD is short for International Institute for Management Development. It publishes this performance in their World Competitiveness Yearbook. And WEF, short for World Economic Forum, publishes this competitiveness performance in their Global Competitiveness Report. Public can view the competitiveness indicators of different countries in either of these publications. In the recent World Competitiveness Yearbook 2020 by IMD, Malaysia's competitiveness ranking has dropped. Out of 63 countries assessed by IMD, our position in 2019 from 22nd, it has dropped to 27 this year in 2020. The overall competitiveness rank by IMD is calculated based on 255 criteria that is made up of both hard and soft data. There are quite a lot of hard data. There are 163 hard data and 92 soft data. The soft data here refers to the survey data collected by the MPC on the opinions of the executives from different industries. There are 4 categories of competitiveness factors. These countries are being compared by IMD. The factors are economic performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and infrastructure. In our webinar today, our speaker, Encik Mohammad Abdul Hamid, will be presenting on one of the criteria. It's called Gini Coefficient. This Gini Coefficient is a sub-factor in societal framework. Societal framework is in turn within the government efficiency factor. Gini Coefficient is related to the measure spread of income and wealth inequality in a country. Now, this is a topic very close to Encik Mohammad's heart. You'll see why he's probably one of the best candidates to present this topic. He will share with us the highlights and drivers of our current IMD ranking of this indicator, as well as recommending initiatives that can help Malaysia to improve on our current ranking on this indicator in the future. Let me introduce Encik Mohammad Abdul Hamid. Encik Mohammad is a social entrepreneur and the founder of the company Behavioral Insight Consultancy. You can find his company web at nudge.com.my. He and his team focus on public policy, but also work with the private sector and a non-governmental organization. He holds a master's degree in public policy from the University of Malaya and a Master of Philosophy in Maths from the University of Cambridge. Encik Mohammad has emerged as an impartial public policy consultant who cares about equality and a just society. His interest covers not only the public policy, but a variety of other areas as well, such as behavioral insights in economics, socio-economic and social impact study, retirement savings, social cohesion, and impact. He also pays attention and promotes work in sustainable development, particularly the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, also known as global goals that relate to poverty, wealth, and income inequality, which is the topic that he's going to share with us today. Right? Encik Mohammad Abdul Hamid has 20 years of experience in the corporate sector and voluntary work in a non-governmental organization and project management in the oil and gas industry. He is also believed to be one of the few pioneers in the applications of behavioral insight in Malaysia, who hopes to fill the gap of the public knowledge through his work. He regularly shares his thoughts as a speaker in webinars. He's also a columnist who exercises his influence on public opinion. He contributes regularly commentary and opinion pieces in News Straits Times, The Star, Malaysia Gini, and the Malay Mail. His views provide a better informed public about current national, political, and social problems, and find collectively the solutions of these problems. Let us all listen to this interesting topic on Gini Coefficient. Let me hand over to Encik Mohammad Abdul Hamid. Over to you, Mohammad.
Okay, thank you.
Very
you
eager
very
to
much.
listen to this. This is something that you have a lot of interest in. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone, to all our viewers who turn into our webinar today. Thank you for taking the opportunity to be with us today. I would first like to thank you, Malaysia Productivity Corporation, MPC, who has taken the initiative to do this competitiveness study, and for inviting me to be part of the initiative to look at how we can improve Malaysia's competitiveness. The presentation today will be on Gini Coefficient, as highlighted or mentioned by Mr. Lawrence earlier. When we talk about Gini Coefficient, well, actually Gini is a name of a person who developed this coefficient. He's a Italian statistician, seorang ahli statistik yang telah membangunkan coefficient ini, Gini Coefficient. And when we talk about Gini Coefficient, it's a measure of income or wealth inequality. And obviously, when we talk about income or wealth inequality, it's about the distribution of a country's wealth, agihan kekayaan of a particular country among the population. So it's about how the wealth of a nation is distributed among all of the population. So Gini coefficient has been used to measure. It's being used to measure one is income, for example, our how we get our salary income on monthly basis. But it can also be used to measure wealth inequality. And when we talk about wealth, it includes all the assets that we have, the property, financial assets, and all that. But the focus of the discussion today, which is also what is one of the criteria in the IMD Competitiveness Index ranking, is on income inequality. So when in the context of presentation today, Gini coefficient refers to income inequality, not wealth inequality. The purpose of the presentation today is to present and discuss Malaysia's income inequality, which is using Gini coefficient within the context of IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook 2020, in which myself, Mr. Lawrence, and other consultants that have been engaged by MPC have been working on for the past few months on the study. Let's look at some the background. As highlighted by Mr. Lawrence earlier, Gini coefficient falls under the category of government efficiency. There are 4 categories within the IMD World Competitiveness Ranking. Apart, the other 3 include economic performance, business efficiency, and infrastructure. And Gini coefficient is within the government efficiency. There are various other frameworks, one of which is societal framework. And within societal framework, there are approximately 15 criteria altogether, and Gini coefficient is one of them. So I know maybe it's a little bit, you probably cannot see the interrelations very clearly, But that's just kind of to give a broad, very broad, high-level picture on where does this Gini coefficient fits into the overall competitiveness ranking. When we talk about how the contribution of Gini coefficient to competitiveness. Income inequality is a very important dimension of welfare because that's the way then in one perspective, for example, the people or the population of a given country will see whether they receive a fair share of the country's income or of a country's wealth. So if in other words, if the gap or the disparity of income between the rich and the poor is very big, then there could be issues, for example, dissatisfaction among certain segment of society, especially those who are less privileged, those who are in poverty, those who are in the in the bottom section of our society, from the perspective of income and wealth. And certainly, when we talk about income inequality, it will have it is directly related to poverty. It has a significant implication on poverty eradication programs, and therefore any initiative to address poverty in a country will help to narrow the income disparity as well, or income inequality as well. So you will notice that in this presentation, I'll probably use the term inequality and disparity interchangeably. But they are meant to mean same thing, inequality and disparity. So income inequality or income disparity is the same thing. And there are various ways to measure how wealth or income is distributed in a particular country. Gini coefficient is probably one of the most common one. And it is based on a Lorentz curve, which is shown on the right-hand side of the slide in front of you. And this curve is really showing on the y-axis, the vertical axis, is the cumulative income share, percent. And on the horizontal axis is the cumulative household share, so percent of number of household in percent. And without going into too much detail on the the technical details of that, in simple terms, or the higher the value of Gini coefficient, the closer it is to 1 or 100%. Some people, some publication or use 1, some 0 to 1, a scale from 0 to 1, but some publication use 0 to 100. 0 to 100 refers to 0% to 100%. But the higher the value, that means is more unequal. It's not good lah. But the lower the value means is better, more fairly distributed, more evenly distributed among the population. So a value of 0, for example, a value of 0 means a kind of perfect situation where the wealth of a country is distributed equally among all the member of a population in a given country. Whereas if it's a value of 100 or 1, if depending on the scale that one used, then that means that the wealth of a country is concentrated only to 1% in that country. So so that's the two extremes, 0 and 1, and somewhere in between just shows and the number typically range somewhere in between, can only be in the range from 0 to 1. I guess if as I go along, if any of our viewer have any question, I believe they can write a comment or raise a hand, and Mr. Lawrence and probably be able to see the comment and can raise the question to me at any point of the conversation, so that our viewer will not forget or to to ask whatever question or clarification they may have. There are three pillars to reduce inequality in general. One is to do with public services. What kind of public services provided to the population? And these include education, healthcare, and social protection. Social protection can be, for example, in the form of what happens if one is to lose a job for whatever reason, due to accidents or due to retrenchment, retirement, or all kind of situation where people can be out of job or in unemployment status. And what kind of service, what kind of benefits or what kind of help government provide to them. So that's really is about social protection. So you can progressive taxation is the second pillar. Another way to reduce income inequality. Progressive taxation means that you tax higher rate, you tax more people for richer people, for rich people, and lower tax rate, less tax for the poorer people. So this is where maybe there's always a discussion everywhere in democratic world, everywhere in open market economy. There's always this discussion about how do you tax your people? Is your tax pro poor people, or is it to pro rich people? And obviously there are arguments for both sides of the for both sides of the discussion, to tax more for the poor or to tax more for the rich, things like that. And I think at one point also in Malaysia, when we have GST, there's also discussion about the nature of GST, whether it is progressive and whether it is regressive. Regressive is just an opposite side of progressive, meaning that you tax more of the poor people and less of the richer people. And there's a lot more to do with taxation, obviously. It's to there's a discussion around productivity. If, for example, you give too much welfare or protection to the people, benefits to the poor, does it disincentivize them to do work? Meaning that if you help people too much, will it make them more lazy to do work? So those are the kind of argument that is always being discussed, especially among the policymakers, economists, politicians, obviously. I think if you look, for example, if you look at American politics, for example, between Republican and the Democrats, there's always, I think every election, there's always discussion about taxation. I think generally, if I understand it correctly, Republican is always be portrayed as or more of kind of pro-rich, pro capital owners, whereas the Democrats is more like a more welfare-ish kind of more welfare-ish kind of tax proposal that they have. But that is there's no right or wrong. It depends on the state of development of a particular country, nature of poverty, nature of income inequality, and all that. Science and technological advancements. Those are all areas can play an important role as well. And thirdly, the pillar to reduce inequality is to do with labor. The pasaran pekerjaan. How do you treat your labor? What kind of salary do you give to them? Is it more inclusive? Treatment of workers' rights, minimum wage. Do you have to set minimum wage? And Malaysia, we know Malaysia has adopted minimum wage for some time already. I think around 2013, 2014 timeframe. So those are the three general way to reduce inequality. One is through public service, providing the necessities, I would call it basic necessities to the people in terms of education, health, and social protection. Number two, in terms of setting up a progressive taxation system. And number three, creating a conducive labor market environment. Next, let's look at Malaysia's Gini Coefficient. Malaysia's Gini Coefficient, we can trace back all the way back to the formation of this country. The chart that I've shown is actually showing the Gini Coefficient in orange bar. I hope you can also see orange on your screen. The orange bar is the Gini Coefficient from 1979-1980 to some 40 years ago to 2019. This chart is produced by the Department of Statistics Malaysia, Jabatan Perangkaan. So these are official figure by our government. So we can see that in general, the overall trend has been on declining from around 50% Gini coefficient in 1979-1980, 50.5 to 40.7, 40.7 in 2019. So so over a period of almost 40 years, 4 decades, Malaysia has been able to reduce our income inequality or Gini coefficient by 10 percentage point, from 50.5 to 40.7, 50.5 ke 40.7. So no doubt Malaysia has been successful to a certain extent to reduce income inequality among the population. And I think if we observe that from anecdotal evidence or from the standard of living of the people in the country as a whole, if you compare 20, 30 years ago compared to today, obviously the standard of living of Malaysians generally has improved. But no doubt there are still pockets of poverty occurring in the country, as we all know. Now let's zoom in to the ranking, competitiveness ranking. How does Malaysia fare in terms of Gini coefficient? There are a number of curves on the screen in front of you on the chart. I apologize for that, but it indicate various other criteria, 3 criteria actually to be exact. The one that we are interested in is actually the one in gray. But it's okay. We don't have to, it's not easy to our eyes anyhow. But what this chart is showing is that over the past 10 years, from year 2011, Malaysia's Gini coefficient on IMD ranking has been ranked consistently below 40th position, di bawah kedudukan 40 daripada lebih 60 negara yang berada di dalam carta IMD competitiveness ranking. So we are not in a very good position when we compare with other countries. The fact that we are at 2/3, 40 daripada 60 lebih kurang 2/3 lah, 2/3 kita punya ranking 2/3 terbawah lah, kedudukan 2/3 terbawah compared to other countries. Obviously compared to other countries in the ranking, the highest position we've been is in 48th position in 2013. Now let's look based on 2000. Okay, now we are talking about this presentation today focus on what is Malaysia's ranking in 2020. But we need to understand how does the IMD did the ranking. When I look at this ranking for Malaysia, apparently the data that is used for the ranking is based on 2015 data. meaning that it is quite outdated compared to other countries. Many other countries are using data from year 2018, tahun 2018 for 2020 ranking. So that is something that we need to be aware of. Our Gini coefficient in 2015 is 41%, and we are ranked at 49 out of 63 countries. This information is actually this Gini coefficient that is being used by IMD actually is taken or extracted from the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, Human Development Report, which is issued by World Bank. Where the data in turn comes from the World Bank. In 2020 ranking, the country that is ranked #1 is a small country in Europe, maybe not very popular, is Slovenia. Slovenia at the rank at a Gini coefficient of 24.20. So from this, we know that the data that is used for Malaysia's Gini coefficient is pretty outdated. Is 2015, whereas at the time of when they did this ranking, we already have a Gini coefficient from year 2016, which is issued by our Department of Statistics, DOSM. So we know that it's a little bit outdated. And also it's a different year compared to the year that DOSM produced the coefficient, which is 2016. Because of that, we are not able to make a direct comparison between the Gini coefficient published by IMD, which is coming from World Bank, and the one that is coming from DOSM, because of the different year that they use in coming up with the Gini coefficient. Our DOSM, our Department of Statistics, did not produce a Gini coefficient for year 2015. So that's why we cannot do that comparison. For everyone's information, our Gini coefficient that is issued by Department of Statistics is produced when the DOSM, Jabatan Perangkaan, did their household income and basic amenity survey. Household income and basic amenity survey, which is done twice every 5 years. 2 kali setiap 5 tahun. Dan kali terakhir DOSM melaksanakan household income and basic amenity survey was in year 2019, tahun 2019, but the result was only published earlier around July this year. So therefore, the IMD ranking, even though it's for 2020, it cannot capture the result from DOSM. Again, it goes back to the two reasons. Number one, they use data from World Bank. And secondly, even if they want to use the data from the Department of Statistics, the latest one was only published in around July 2020, whereas the IMD ranking was published earlier this year, few months before. But generally, we know that regardless of that, regardless of our inability to compare between data from the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook and the data published by DOSM, we know that over a 10-year period, our ranking on international level are low, consistently below 40th position. The key authorities that are involved or have influence in income inequality or Gini coefficient in Malaysia is our economic planning unit, in which they are directly involved in Malaysia Plan, Shared Prosperity Vision. For example, in our Shared Prosperity Vision, there's a target for Gini coefficient to be at 34.0 by year 2030. So there's an objective in the Shared Prosperity Vision, wawasan kemakmuran bersama, to address wealth and income disparities among Malaysian population. And other authority include Ministry of Finance because they are, for example, responsible for the cash transfer, bantuan sara hidup, or previously known as BRIM. There's also Inland Revenue Board, Lembaga Hasil, and lastly, National Wage Consultative Council. We have a legislation and an Act of Parliament, which is a National Wage Consultative Council Act 2011, which gives the provision for the formation of this council that set the minimum wage for the country. In looking at Malaysia's ranking for Gini Coefficient in the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook 2020, I look at kind of two broad areas. Number one is the fact that we have, I didn't mention maybe earlier that actually our position has improved a little bit from last year's ranking to 2020. I think improved by 3 positions, from 49 position to 52nd position. Obviously, when we said when there's a change in the rank, it can be attributed to 2 reasons. One is internal reason, meaning that we're doing something good to improve our ranking, or it can be due to external reason. External reason meaning that other countries are doing worse than us. So those can be two general factors that can contribute to our ranking on a year-to-year basis. But I look at as I mentioned earlier, drivers to current ranking of our Gini coefficient. One area I look at is why there is an improvement, and secondly, why there is a low performance of Gini coefficient over a 10-year period up to this year. The first area is to do with improvement over a year period, noting that this is based on 2015 computation of Gini coefficient by World Bank, which is used by IMD. Excuse me. And apparently around that time, it is the time when Malaysia implement the minimum wage. So that could have contributed to why our position has improved. So industry is responding to government's initiative with a minimum wage. And secondly, there was also an increase in the amount of cash transfer at that time known as BRIM in the year 2015. For example, household of earning below 3,000 ringgit per month at that time, their BRIM, they are entitled to a BRIM. Their BRIM entitlement amount has been increased from 650 ringgit to 950 ringgit, 300 ringgit increase. So that's kind of why we think that why Malaysia's position has improved. But I think more importantly, what we should be focusing on is why consistently over long term, for the past 10 years, we are not doing well in Gini coefficient. So this should be our key focus, because once we understand this, hopefully then we can formulate, our policymakers can formulate strategies and plans to address this long-term issue that has been facing Malaysia and therefore affecting our competitiveness on the world ranking. Number one, why we have not been doing very well is to do with the fact that our income of Malaysian workers are low. I will show the evidence right after this. And secondly, is to do with the fact that new job creation in the country, peluang-peluang pekerjaan baru yang diwujudkan kebanyakannya adalah untuk pekerja kemahiran rendah. New job creation is low skilled. And thirdly, is to do with the fact that in our country we have abundance of foreign workers. Ramai pekerja-pekerja asing yang bekerja di sektor yang memberikan pendapatan yang rendah dengan pendapatan rendah dan juga kemahiran rendah. Low skill, low income. Okay. So to show some of the evidence on low income, for example, the curve on the left, the green curve actually shows over the years. Okay, we see this is showing the monthly salary for Malaysian worker lah. Gaji pekerja di Malaysia. Also data from published from our Department of Statistics. Over the years, this is showing dari tahun 2013 to year sampai tahun 2018, over a period of 6 years. So we can see that there's a general increase. There are two lines there. The orange line is for mean income, pendapatan purata. The blue curve is the median income, pendapatan median. So we can see that generally over the past, over the period that is shown on the curve, 6 years, there has been an increase. Ada peningkatan pendapatan dari segi gaji pekerja di Malaysia. However, 50% of Malaysian workers, 50% daripada pekerja-pekerja di Malaysia earn below RM2,500 per month. So maknanya gaji mereka adalah agak rendah lah. Maknanya tak sampai RM2,500 sebulan antara tahun 2013 hinggalah tahun 2018. So that's related to the low absolute income among many Malaysian workers, affecting Malaysian workers. And the curve on the right is just showing that income disparity. This is a curve produced in one of the WKB, Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama 2030 document. I took the curve from that document. It shows that if you see from the left curve, a small gap, but over time it become wider and wider. So it's just showing that income jurang pendapatan, that's the word in Malay, jurang pendapatan, income inequality makin meluas di kalangan pekerja-pekerja di Malaysia. I mentioned earlier about the low skill job creation, meaning that peluang pekerjaan baru yang diwujudkan adalah dari pekerjaan kemahiran rendah. There was a study in a report published by Bank Negara, and it shows that the left-hand curve ni memang show that over the period under the study, there has been an increase in the job created for low skill. Maknanya dalam period sebelum yang sebelah kiri, 8% dia kerja low skill, but up to 2017, yang bar on the right hand side of this chart, dah naik 2 kali ganda ke 16%. Daripada 8% pekerjaan kemahiran rendah yang dihasilkan pada tempoh sebelum ni, kepada 2 kali ganda naik kepada 16% pekerjaan berkemahiran rendah. Jadi so we know that low skill job will produce low income, and that explain why we have that low income, and that would have contributed to wide income inequality. And thirdly is to do with the abundance of foreign workers, because we know that we have many foreign workers in Malaysia, whether in plantation, in construction sector and all that. And because of the ease to hire foreign workers in Malaysia, agak senang untuk dapatkan pekerja asing di Malaysia. Malaysia is seen as a low-cost country that with a low wage or low income, yang boleh for foreign workers. Because of that, because we can offer low cost to the investors, we give that impression, and not only impression, but that's the reality also. then the salary is low, low skill, low salary, and it also put a downward pressure to the salary of local workers, Malaysian workers. So because of the fact that it is relatively easy to get foreign workers in Malaysia. Obviously, there are other relevant factors of why we are where we are in terms of foreign labours. But those are the issue from the perspective of income inequality. Employers are able to keep salary low, affecting salary levels of local workers, and therefore foreign multinationals, pelabur-pelabur asing, relocate their lower value added process to Malaysia, because that's the kind of the signal that we send to our foreign investors. Foreign companies will relocate their lower value added process to Malaysia and moving higher productivity and higher value added process to other countries. So the last part, so what do we do with it? I mean, the fact that you know, we are not doing very well on our income inequality from competitiveness perspective, and also from other evidences that we can see in the country. There are three recommendations. One is to do with the improvement of poverty eradication policy and programs, because as highlighted early on in the presentation, that to address income inequality, we have to address the issue of poverty. Secondly, we have to improve income of lower income and vulnerable households. How do we, how do we improve income of the lower income groups? And thirdly, is implement a more progressive tax system. So when we talk about improving the poverty eradication policy and programs, what is recommended here is for the country or the government to adopt and develop a targeted, customized and evidence-based program using data, because we know that the nature of poverty is not the same. For example, if you compare poverty in Peninsular Malaysia, may not be the same with poverty dimensions in Sabah and Sarawak, for example. Or if we look within Peninsular Malaysia, poverty, urban poverty, the nature of urban poverty is not the same with the nature of rural poverty. And if you look even among rural, you look at, for example, Kuala Krai in Kelantan, or Baling in Kedah, or any other areas or regions that we can look at. Among different sector, the fishermen versus the agriculture, those involved in the agriculture, or those involved in the manufacturing or plantation. There are obviously differences in the nature of the poverty, and therefore it is important that now that we know that the technology is there, especially with regards to data science and all that, then we should be able to do a more targeted, a more customized evidence-based program to tailor poverty eradication programs according to the needs of each of the different groups. And we know that based on latest data, there are more than 400,000 households, poor households in the country. So that's quite a considerable number. And obviously, the nature of poverty among these 400 households is certainly not the same, and therefore the need to be more targeted and more customized to address the issue or to alleviate the issue. And secondly, is to do with the fact that we know that now that poverty is not only about income. It's also about there are other dimensions of poverty, and that's where now that's what we know as multidimensional poverty, which can be measured using multidimensional poverty index, in which when we talk about multi-dimensional poverty, it looks at generally 3 dimensions. One is to do with standard of living, second is in terms of health, and third is in terms of education. Because at the end of the day, for example, if we are able to improve education of the children of the poor people, then it will help in terms of social mobility, that in the future he can get a better education, he can get a university degree, for instance, or do a TVET program. And therefore, from that qualification, hopefully he can get a better job. And with a better job, then he can get a better income. So that's why when we look at poverty, it's not only about looking at income, but also you look at other dimensions of poverty that are as essential or as important as income. And it's also very related to income as well. So when we improve, for example, the access to healthcare to poor people, then they are able to return to work. For example, if they are ill, then they are able, when they have good access to quality healthcare, then they are able to return to work faster. Secondly, when we talk about improvement of income of lower income groups, we should the recommendation is to enforce the minimum wage order 2020. Early this year, the government issued this minimum wage order 2020. But obviously, in terms of implementation, that is where enforcement comes to play. And as we know, Malaysia has been implementing a cash transfer program to help the lower income household, the B40 groups, for example. But again, the fact that we know different part of the country have different living standards, different cost of living. Klang Valley is not the same with, for example, Pasir Mas in Kelantan, or Kuala Nerus in Terengganu. So the recommendation here is again to do micro targeting for cash transfer, meaning that knowing that cost of living is different for different area or different region in Malaysia, then therefore the amount of cash transfer, there's an opportunity there to further optimize the amount of cash transfer given to our population, considering all those factors. And also, I think we know this year Malaysia has also increased our PLI, poverty line income, from more than twofolds, from 980 ringgit before to 2,208. Yeah, dua kali ganda ditingkatkan PGK. In Malay we call it PGK. Pendapatan garis kemiskinan, the level of poverty below which you are considered poor household. This is income per month per household. And the other one is to do with because we are still if we still encouraging investors to come in, be it foreign or local investors. I think what policymakers can do is also to encourage the investors to adopt living wage as minimum wage. Living wage means that kind of a more higher a wage that correspond to the cost of living, so that the workers, the workers or the employees are compensated enough, sufficiently compensated, so that he can lead an acceptable standard of living. I will talk a little bit more about living wage, what it is, and how we where we are at the in this country. And when the third recommendations is to do with implementation of a more progressive taxation system. And here what is recommended is to gradually increase the income tax rate for the for those in the top income bracket, or for those who are earning above certain threshold. And what is that threshold, and those are the things, the detail that can be further evaluated. I mentioned earlier that the importance of minimum wage enforcement. So the fact that we have early this year issued, the government has issued the minimum wage order 2020 effective from 1st February with a minimum wage of 1,200 ringgit per month for 56 city councils and municipalities in Malaysia. So and 1,100 ringgit for other administrative areas in Malaysia. So how do we know how effective this is? How do we know that all employers are complying to this minimum wage order? So I think this is where the importance of enforcement come to play, to ensure that all employers are adhering or complying to this minimum wage order. Secondly, I mentioned earlier about the living wage, something that maybe from policymakers' perspective, what we can recommend is to encourage new investors, be it foreign investors or local investors, to adopt living wage when they want to pay their workers, their employees, when they come up or develop the remuneration package for their employees. So living wage really is about referring to income level needed for any household to afford a minimum acceptable living standard, and that include not only the basic makan, minum, tempat tinggal, pakaian, and all that, but also important is the ability to participate in society. So that is the minimum, so that he or she, a household does not have to worry about to put on the table. Don't have to worry. Don't have to work to, for example, there shouldn't be many people having to do more than one job in a household. For example, on day you have to do certain job, nighttime you have to do Grab, Panda, whatever. Rightly, we want to minimize a household of people having to do two jobs, just to make ends meet, just to have enough income. And obviously there are various reasons why that is important, be it in terms of and one of these is so that he or she, a household, can be able to lead a more healthier lifestyle, ability to participate in society, can do have time to spend with the family, do sports, for example. So those are important because that is also related to our mental or mental health, in which we know that mental health is increasingly becoming an issue for many people, including those in Malaysia. So it's also living wage is really making sure that giving enough income for people to not only have basic necessities but also be able to participate in society, and be able to and have don't have to worry about money, don't have to be stressed, because financial stress, as we know, is one of the issue that can affect people. And if you look at, for example, in a family or in a marriage, that can also contribute to a divorce rate, the breakup of family institution and all that, once you start to have all this issue about financial in a family or in a household, kesuntukan, kesempitan hidup and all that. The map on the background, if you can see in the chart, I've shown a map. Probably it's not that clear, it's overlapping with the text box, but it's actually a map of the United States. And if you can see, there are different shades of blue, different colors. And what it shows is actually different state in US. Of course, US is a very big country, and nowhere compared to Malaysia. They have, I guess, more than 50 states, lebih daripada 50 negeri. We only have, only less than 20. So you can see, but in the states, they have for different states, different living wage. Because why? Partly because it's to do with different cost of living. For example, California is different from Colorado, different from Texas, different from the cost of living for different states is different, and therefore they have a different living wage for different states. So maybe, and we know also the same applies to Malaysia. Selangor and KL does not have the same living cost compared to Perlis or Kedah or Sabah and Sarawak. So therefore, it will be preferable, or it will be good. It is recommended, in fact, to kind of develop living wage for different states, considering the different living standards, different cost of living that we have for different geographical location. And fortunately, in Malaysia, Bank Negara has done some work on living wage. The table that I showed is a table developed by Bank Negara in a report for Kuala Lumpur, based on cost of living in 2016. Another thing about the beauty of living wage is that it is a function of time, meaning that over the years we know that cost of living will increase. That's just the nature of our life or our economy in the modern world. Cost of living will only increase; it will not decrease generally. And therefore, the beauty of living wage is that once it is updated. Once it is set, it's not cast in stone. Over the years, as cost of living increase, then living wage will be increased accordingly. So I think, and that is also why, for example, it's important. For example, if someone or whoever is in the labor market or whoever is an employee working, I think it is important that, for example, the pay rise that they receive, kenaikan gaji must be more than the inflation rate. Kadar inflasi. Otherwise, then it will be worse off lah. If for example, your increment tu lagi rendah berbanding dengan kadar inflasi. And that, I think that is the beauty of this concept of living wage. Not only consider the cost of living for different geographical location, but they also consider the fact that over a period of time, cost of living increase, and therefore living wage must be changed or updated accordingly. For example, in 2016, based on Bank Negara study, it reckons that for a single living in Kuala Lumpur, he or she must have a salary of 2,007 ringgit per month. So you can see, if you compare that with minimum wage, there is still quite considerable gap, because the living minimum wage, the highest is still only about 1,200. 1,200 is minimum wage for 56 city councils and municipalities. Excuse me. More than twice, for a single, for someone who is single. Of course, there are assumptions behind that. So there's still a considerable gap between minimum wage in Malaysia and living wage, and that's where I think Malaysia, to be more competitive, especially from the perspective of Gini coefficient criteria, we must move towards adopting living wage for our workers. And the third or the final recommendation that I stated in my earlier is to implement a more progressive tax system and there has been many studies that talks about the importance of having a progressive tax system to address income inequality. For example, I quote there from OECD shows that tax as well as transfer ni macam yang tadilah, macam BRIM, bantuan sara hidup and all that, have significant redistributive impact. And it has been experiences from other countries shows that if we have a right combination, if a country has a right combination between tax and transfer settings, then the income inequality can be reduced by 25%, 25%, a quarter. That's a lot. So, and that's why I think this is something that we are recommending for Malaysia to adopt, to implement a more progressive tax system. A case in point, or for example, is shown on the table. Hopefully, all can see on the screen. When we compare, for example, the country ranked first in the Gini Coefficient in 2020, Slovenia, the tax rate for maximum income tax rate. Maximum income tax rate refers to the tax rate that is imposed on the top income earners in the country. So 50%, 50%. In Sweden, for example, 57%. So whereas in Malaysia we are still below 30%, our max income tax rate. So this is obviously there are opportunities there. Obviously there are further evaluation that has to be done, but I think this is something, if I can say, a low-hanging fruit. This is something that we can do to improve income inequality in Malaysia. Earlier on, I talked about, let's shift a little bit before I end the presentation. Coming to an end, early on, I talked about the nature of poverty. That is not only about income, but also other dimensions that will also have contribution eventually to the income. And that is multidimensional poverty. And Malaysia has already adopted that in our RMK 11, Rancangan Malaysia ke-11. And there are indicators across the education, health, living standards, as well as income. And that is something that we should put more emphasis on as we go into RMK 12, as we move into Rancangan Malaysia ke-12 pada tahun 2021, which is only a few months' time. And from here, hopefully, once we start to implement more initiatives in accordance to multidimensional poverty, hopefully poverty rate will be reduced and income inequality also will be improved, and therefore Gini coefficient will be better, and Malaysia's competitiveness, the contribution of Gini to Malaysia's competitiveness on the world stage will be better. And with that, I kind of, to summarize, we have seen an improvement, good news for Malaysia from 2019 to 2020, but we are still not doing very good. We still have a lot of room to improve. There are a lot of room for improvement for Malaysia to be able to be more competitive. Because our ranking has been consistently poor since 2011. Recommendations, as I highlighted earlier, given the recommendations, but we know that when we talk about poverty, income inequality, there are obviously we want to do short-term measures, short-term initiatives, but obviously what is more important is to have a sustainable improvement over long term. And therefore, the importance or the significance of doing long-term planning, and the fact that we already have, for example, the key document, Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, with a clear target of Gini coefficient of 34.00. There is a very good sign already that it's going to be a priority item for our government going forward, at least in the next 10 years. And obviously, this initiative we expect to see them be incorporated, be implemented in RMK 12 as we enter to RMK 12 next year. And in this study also, we recommend that with the fact that, if you all recall early on in the presentation, I mentioned that there are differences between the value, between the way the measurement done on Gini coefficient between DOSM and World Bank, which is used by IMD. So that is where I think maybe it's a good idea for stakeholders in Malaysia to meet with the World Bank in Malaysia to engage and improve the measurement process, and maybe sharing of data as well, wherever possible. And also the fact that resource is obviously always limited. It's important that the country's resources is prioritized accordingly. We know that so prioritization is important, giving due priority to key areas, and to me, poverty eradication and income inequality should be areas that we should be giving high priority on. And of course, as with any poverty or income inequality issues in not only unique to Malaysia, there's always area for improvement in terms of data collection and management, because when we talk about public policy addressing issue of poverty and income inequality, we want to do it based on evidence, meaning evidence-based policy, and we can only do that with good data collection and management. With that, I end my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. Pass this back to Mr. Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Encik Mohammad. Very appealing, very direct presentation, very passionate as well. I guess you're very close to this topic. That's why there are a lot of information and statistics that you're sharing. I think it's because of this passion it sparked questions from our audience. So brace yourself. Let me go first in, first out to go through the questions for you. Some of the questions are yes or no questions. Some of the questions are probably requiring you to explain a little bit. So here's the first one from Yu Peng. Yeah. I think it's more like a clarification on the income, the mean income. You probably want to go back to the slide that you shared just now for year 2019. Yu Peng is asking if the mean income 7,901 ringgit for the year 2019. Is it for the household? I believe is the clarification whether this mean income is for the household or for individual.
Okay, I guess it's referring to the graph shown earlier, right?
Yes.
This one?
Yes,
okay.
It's referring to the graph earlier that you showed. You may want to go back to that slide. It's easy to show that.
Yeah, this graph on the left, right? The green graph.
You may want to share your screen because your screen is not on the viewer's view anymore. Can you turn on the sharing again?
Okay, just hold on.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we can see it.
Yeah.
Yes, the question is about the mean income, whether it's for the household or not, for 2019.
This is sorry, this chart only show data up to 2018. Is salary for workers, not household. If it's referring,
for individual.
Yeah, individual.
Okay. Okay. I guess
this is for individual.
Okay, I think that clarifies.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's clear to me. I hope that's clear to the person who asked. Yu Peng also asked another question. Yu Peng wants to know more about redundancy cost. The question says whether you can explain more on redundancy cost.
Redundancy cost?
Yes, redundancy cost. That is the question.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we talk a lot more about redundancy cost. I think probably this is an interest to want to know more, knowing that probably you're an expert in this area.
I'm not too sure I fully understand the question.
Okay.
I
Okay.
believe it refers to when a company let go people, retrenchment. Is that what's
Okay.
referring? Is that what it's referring to? I'm not too sure. But obviously, there are.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not.
think I have the same impression as you. Redundancy cost to me, it means the cost of terminating an employee or terminating the employment. So the cost of redundancy
Yeah,
could
I mean, if it
refer
refers
to
to,
that.
I guess if it refers to redundancy in a company, as in you have to let go people, you have to retrench people, then obviously there
Yes,
are
yes,
costs to company, cost to employer, and to
yes.
government. Yeah, I hope that
I
that,
think
that is the question. I hope. So
I
obviously there are
think
costs.
so. I'm not too sure. I think
Yeah.
this question was posted rather early.
Okay.
If I can guess it, it's probably around the time when you explain the three pillars to reduce inequality. Remember the
Mm-hmm.
three pillars are public services, the progressive taxation, and the labor. I think that refers to the first pillar. The first pillar, when you talk about the public services, where it links to the social protection. You know, when somebody has lost
Mm-hmm.
his or her job,
Mm-hmm.
this could lead to income problems. So
Yeah.
I believe this probably is linked to the time when you talk about it, redundancy cost.
I see.
But this is just my
Okay.
opinion. I'm not sure about you.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, let's just try to discuss about that a little bit. Yeah, I guess
Okay. All right.
when we talk about loss of job, loss of job, from public policy perspective, obviously there'll be uh, cost to government, cost to
Mm,
government in terms of the fact that someone has lost a job. He
mm,
probably before is income, obviously is an income earner before, now no more income. And if he
yeah.
cannot get a new, if he or she cannot get a new job within certain period of time, then obviously it will be cost to
Mm,
government. The fact that, for example, now he is entitled to certain aids from the government. For example, the bantuan sara hidup, the cash transfer from the government.
mm,
So
mm,
that's not one perspective. Another one is that the fact that he's no longer working, therefore he will not be paying
mm.
tax, right? He will not be paying
Yeah.
tax. So that
You're
means
right.
less income to the government, less revenue to the government. So
Mm,
those are
mm,
some of the costs that the government has to bear, is directly
mm,
and indirectly as well. But of course, there could be other costs as well. For example, if unemployment become too widespread, as you can see, for
mm,
example, in country like Venezuela, where they have
mm,
all these major issues, then people start,
mm,
because people don't have enough money for basic living
mm,
to satisfy their basic needs. Then people start
mm,
looting. Then you can see start looking for in kejadian mencuri lah. Mencuri there'll be more social problems and all that. And I think in Malaysia we have
mm,
seen that happening as well. It may not be, it's
mm,
maybe just isolated case, but we've seen, for example, I think I've read in the news, for example, you've seen, for example, a
mm,
father curi susu, right? Susu, so that he can feed
mm,
his
mm,
child. So there has been that. Okay, so those will be cost to government and to society as well. Once you have, for example, start to have those kind of issue that are more widespread, then society, government and society will have to bear the cost of
mm,
that.
mm,
So those are the obviously. Okay, I guess another thing is when we talk about social protection, the cost is also about, I think the government has also introduced some kind of insurance before, if I'm not mistaken, insurance to protect, if for example you lose a job, then you are covered by the insurance. There's a name for
mm,
that. I remember exactly the name of that insurance protection. So that's already a step in the right direction. The fact that the government
mm,
has at one point insure workers for loss of job. So those are costs. So because you know, insurance, you have to pay for premium and all that, right? So those are costs associated with social protection. And you have, for example, per case, so I mean, we pay that. SOCSO, yeah. So if we have, for example, occupational accident, accident at work, especially for those workers operating machinery at the factory or that, if he or she is injured, then he will be given a compensation. So SOCSO or PERCASO. So that is the cost also to have that system in place. And obviously we have, for example, EPF for private sector employees. We have EPF, which is mainly for retirement, but also there's also a cost associated with the fact that we have the agency, the EPF, Employee Provident Fund, which is a government agency. You have to have employee to manage and administer the system. So there is also a cost to government to manage that. But that is essential service. To me, that is essential because that is a form of social protection. But obviously, to operate, to have that system, you have to. There's a cost associated with that. So similarly, for government servant, there are what do you call that? Pension system, right? Pension system and insurance for government servant. I think there are insurance, for example, if one is to be involved in accident or then there are insurance as well. So those are the costs that the government and other stakeholders have to bear to have this social protection in place. I hope that answered.
I think that's very clear. That's very clear in check, Mohammad. Yes, you have covered, I think, very well. I believe it's always a problem between or among three parties. You know, you talk about the government, the individual who lost his job. There should be cost also going to the employer because there's a cost of replacing the person who is no longer doing the job. So I think the cost issue should cover all these areas, and you explained it really well. Thank you for that. Let me go to the next question. I think this question is more to try to understand the definition. It says, can explain more on societal framework. I think this probably you could try to define what it is, what framework this refers to, societal framework, and what does it include, I think.
Sorry, framework for what?
Societal framework. You know, our Gini Coefficient is under societal framework. Yeah, I think this person wants to know what societal framework is.
All right. Okay. Let me share what I hopefully can. All right. I know you cannot see this very clearly. Let me try to do it differently.
I think viewers is using mobile phones to listen. We can actually enlarge the screen. So we can enlarge the screen on our side to see what has been presented. So you may want to go to full mode again. Oh, you want to enlarge it? I think that's good.
Yeah. I guess. Okay. In general,
go to full screen again, or you can read it out. I think that is also another way for us to know what is within the societal framework.
Okay. Well, I guess this societal framework is one of the framework within government efficiency. This is defined by IMD. They are the party that is developing the ranking, the competitiveness ranking. One of which is to do with government efficiency. And under government efficiency, there is a number of framework. One of it is societal framework. So, under societal framework,
so I guess all these are the societal framework elements.
Exactly, there are 15 elements in societal framework. Well, it is this is defined by IMD based on their study, based on their work. They look, for example, in societal framework of in terms of justice, in terms of aging population, social cohesion, which we talked about last week, Gini coefficient, also income distribution, lowest 10%, highest 10%. Maybe I should have highlighted this earlier. There's also other elements related to income inequality, which is how is the distribution of income among the top percent of the population, among the lowest 10% of the population, who income share by lowest 60% of the population. So those are associated with income inequality, distribution of wealth in a particular nation. And then that's mentioned about equal opportunity, between various segment of society, be it male, female, disabled person, people with disabilities. So how do you create that within different ethnicity, religion, and all that, geographical location, representation of females in parliament, unemployment rate. So those are generally defined by IMD in coming up with their ranking. So to me, it's kind of what kind of criteria or conditions in the society that will promote competitive society. And this, by definition of IMD, is important in terms of what society must have, the preconditions for you to be competitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let me move on to the next question. The next question has two parts, posted by Mr. Wong. The first part is trying to tell you that he noticed the data used for Malaysia in the WCY 2020 report is taken from the year 2015. Right? I think you said that before, with a value of 41. Yeah. The data that you showed in the bar chart, I think this refers to the bar chart that you showed from the DOSM report. The data that you show in the bar chart indicated our Gini coefficient is 40.7 in 2019. 40.7 in 2019. Yep, this is the one. Does this mean Malaysia is does this mean that Malaysia is hardly progressing in the right direction with its implementation of government policies to reduce income disparity across population and bring down the Gini coefficient? So I guess the coefficient in 2019 shows that it's going worse. So I think the question is asking whether, are we moving in the right direction, even with the implementation of our government policy?
That is a very relevant and valid question. And as shown on the chart, the three bars, if you see the three bars on the right, is actually year 2014, 2016, and 2019. And the comment or the remark made is correct also, that we are not moving in the right direction, or in other words, we are moving in the wrong direction. The fact that our Gini coefficient has worsened in 2016. In 2016, the last time DOSM did their household income survey, it was 39, or just below 40. I can't read 39.9. But in 3 years later, last year is 40.7. So the number has increased. The number has increased, even though it's just maybe, of course, let's not quote the number, how many percent point, because that doesn't tell you anything. But directionally, yes, we are not going in the right direction. Even if you look at in 2014, we are better. 2014, we are 40.1. We are 40.1. So
I think that's the best so far, for 40.1. And the next one is the best below 40.
The best is 2016, 39.9. According to So that's right. From this data, we are not we kind of course the figure is kind of hovering around 40 for the past since 2014, for the past 7 years or so. So that is obviously something I think as policymakers, the government have to pay attention to. But the fact that we have the WKB, the shared prosperity vision, with a clear objective to address income inequality, then hopefully in RMK 12, as we enter next year, then sufficient attention will be given to address this. But very good, very
I
good
think it's
point
confirmed.
highlighted.
Yeah. So you have confirmed that even though we have implementation from the government policies to reduce this disparity, we are not moving in the right direction yet. So the second part of the question is, what do you think are the shortcomings in the actions taken by Malaysia so far? If we are not moving in the right direction with the policies that we have so far, so what are the shortcomings of the actions then? What didn't we do right? What haven't we done enough, perhaps?
Okay, I think there are various issues or various factors that could have contributed to our dismal performance in income inequality. But I wouldn't say a single factor could have contributed to that. They're more likely, I guess, multiple factors that could have contributed to our poor performance. As mentioned earlier, for example, Malaysia has been in a middle income trap as a country. We have been in a middle income trap since end of 90s, since after the Asian financial crisis in 1997. So it has been more than 20 years that we are in this middle income trap where we have not been able to move to high value added economy. So only with high value added economy, then you can compensate your workers with higher salary, isn't it? And evidence has been shown from the study that I shared earlier that on the contrary, we have been creating low skill jobs. So when once we start, so that's a structural issue with the economy in our country, and there has to be a turnaround on that, because at the end of the day, you're talking about improving income of the majority of the population. Then only you will see improvement of income inequality. So it has to do with so there must be we must address the issue of structural problem with our economy. For example, we know that we are producing many graduates from universities and higher education institutions, but there's an issue of mismatch between between the graduates and the job market. Because we are not able to, the job market is not able to give the jobs that is produced by our universities or higher education institutions. So those are some of the issues, and that's why, for example, we see that in unemployment, the highest among the highest or even the highest portion of unemployment is among the graduates, university graduates, and it goes back to the fact that we have not been able to move to high value added economy, high value added economy, meaning that, for example, going for more of a technology based science, technological advances, where, for example, engineers, you need to hire engineer when you go to that, for example, or scientists, or otherwise then that's going to be an issue. But the big question is how do you go about doing that? So I think those are the big questions that we as a country, as a government, as a policymakers have to think really hard. How do we go about, especially in this era where disruption is the order, post-coronavirus make it worse for many people, making more people more vulnerable, more households more vulnerable, more people lose jobs, or some people have to go for maybe lower paying jobs than they used to be. Less security, lower social protection. So those, to me, those are fundamental. But there are other factors also that we know, for example, to do with our institutions, we need to reform our institutions so that to reduce issues such as leakages of government allocation, things like that. Those are, because with strong institutions, then we can better manage the public programs, the public policy programs, initiatives that we have implemented, in making sure that programs are more effective and efficient, minimize potential issue of corruption and leakages in the system.
Yep, thank you for that, Encik Mohammad. You're given a number of items, food for thought, especially for the policymakers, to see how we can improve it going forward. Let me move on to the next question. Next question is to ask for your opinion and your thoughts on quotes, paras garis kemiskinan baharu. If I interpret it, I think it means the new poverty line level. I think. So what are your thoughts on this new poverty line level?
If we look at the
specific,
number,
though, it's not specific about what new poverty line, at least to me. I hope it is clearer to you.
I think what I can comment is that we are moving in the right direction. The fact that this year, a few months ago, we have revised our PLI, poverty line income, or pendapatan garis kemiskinan, to over 2,200 ringgit per household. 2,200.
Okay.
From 980 before. So we have seen more than twice increase in the poverty line for the nation. So that is a step in the right direction.
I see.
But we know that if, for example, I compare that with the living wage by Bank Negara, is only is less than income for a single person. Let me show the table. 2,700 ringgit. Because for a single person
level,
in KL,
are you sure?
Yeah, this 2,000. So it's even though we have increased our PGK or PLI, but it is still lower than. Remember, it is for household. But for a living wage in KL, you need at least 2,700 ringgit. So it's still lower than living wage, and this is 2016, based on cost of living in 2016, 4 years ago. Now it's already 2020. So you see, there's still a gap there, and there is household. You see, the PGK is for household 2,200. So even if you look at KL in 2016, a couple without child, only a couple, husband and wife, the family, the household needs 4,500 ringgit per month combined income. So obviously there are still area that there's still gap there to improve the livelihood of ordinary Malaysian. But the good news also recently in the news is that in RMK 12, in Rancangan Malaysia ke-12, in the 12th Malaysia plan, there was a news saying that in that new plan, government will further increase the PGK, the PLI. But I do not know the figure yet. I haven't seen the figure. So if that is true, that news report is true, then that is again a step in the right direction for the to improve the livelihood of ordinary Malaysians.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question, also by the same person. Do you think the mean income, 7,000 plus ringgit, compared to median income, around 3,000 ringgit, suggests huge income disparity in Malaysia? So I guess this is a question to ask for your opinion. Is this gap considered huge in Malaysia? The mean income of about 7,000 ringgit plus, and the median income of 3,000. I think these two, to me, should be quite close based on the data that you showed just now. But anyway, this is to try to ask for your opinion. If this is a huge disparity.
Yeah, I guess these questions probably better answered by a statistician rather than me, because it's talking about mean and median. Because obviously, mean is just a purata. You know, you have say 10 people, you just divide by 10. But someone may have be earning 10,000 ringgit. One person may be 10,000 ringgit. The other person may be just earning 1,000 ringgit. A very huge gap, but you can still get an average, a high average, right? Because the one
Yes.
person have a very high, because one person is very high income, or 10% or 10% of population have very high income. Therefore, the average will go up, isn't it? So
Yes.
that is why don't use average. I try not to use average or mean, because it can be very misleading. True, it can be very misleading, because you can have people 10% of population, or top 1%, even top 1%. That's what happened in many countries. Is the top 1% that is skewing, if I can say the word, can use that word, skewing the whole
Yes.
the whole figure. Yeah, it will skew the whole figure. That's why it's important to, the more meaningful figure to look at is median, because median means that at least 50, not at least 50% of population earns below that. So you know at least 50% is earning below that. So that tells a lot. That tells a lot of story about how far we are doing in terms of income inequality.
Yes, I think you have explained it better than a statistician, Mohammad.
Thank you.
I think that's the whole point. You know, the income distribution is not normal anyway. You can talk about distribution. That's why we're talking about Gini coefficient. It's measuring the spread of the income. So yeah, okay. Let me move on. The same person is trying to confirm. I think the question, there was a typo, I think. So he corrected with another question. So let me ask this on behalf. The question is, but Gini coefficient score decreases, so that suggests better performance and equality over time. So I'm not sure about the dimension of the question. If the question is about decreasing value of Gini coefficient through time, that should suggest better performance, because the spread is not that much anymore. But I'm not sure if there's another dimension of this question to ask. If something that you presented contradicts this understanding. So I'm not sure if you can recall when you presented, I think, in the trend of the Gini coefficient, the values drops. So this suggests better performance. Yeah, those are the two questions.
Okay. I can only guess. I guess maybe it's to do with this this graph.
Same here. That's what I get.
That I've shown earlier. I think there are two different. I think the issue which I probably haven't clearly explained is the fact that this graph is actually for a 40-year period, over 40 since 1979. So this for over 40-year period, we have improved by 10% point. Yeah, we have reduced from 50 to around 40. But the other one, this one, okay, it's not very. Oh, sorry, it's not showing on your chart. Let me show.
I'll change it.
The other chart is only a 10-year period. A 10-year period. Yeah, this chart is only 10-year period from 2011. But this one, this one is not Gini coefficient. This is ranking.
I see.
So so we cannot compare. We cannot compare this chart with the previous chart.
There's clarification between these 2 points. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Because this is okay over 40-year period. Yes, we are doing well. But as you know, also over the past, based on the question earlier by Mr. Wong, I think, for the past 7 years, we are not moving in the right direction. If you really see the figure from 2014 onwards. There's there's a saying about there's so many ways, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So this similarly there's more than one way to present a data. But of course, for over long term, yes, we have improved. But if we start to look at different time frame or different window, then we can start to see whether there are issues or there are problems. And I think we've already highlighted there are issues in the recent years. We are not moving in the right direction. And so that's one part of it. And the other part of it is, where are we in comparison to the other country? And this chart that is showing right now in front of the screen, this is how we compare with other countries, despite the fact that we have improved over 40 years, but yet we are still worse off than many other countries. So meaning that other countries has improved faster than us, isn't it? The conclusion that we can make,
you're right.
other countries are improving faster than us in terms of addressing income inequality. We are not moving as fast as other countries in the ranking.
It's very logical. Thank you for the answer, Mohammad.
Okay.
Yeah, I think talking about the topic about the other countries and the question posted by Inche Wong earlier. Here's another question from Inche Wong. I think your presentation is of vested interest of many today. So I think people want to know more about your opinions. People are eager to know, especially during this COVID-19 period. Things are uncertain. So we want to know what's going to happen. So the question goes like this: what are the best practices in government policies so that Malaysia can consider adopting? So this is asking about ideas that we can probably replicate from other countries, top performing countries, top 5 performing countries in Gini Coefficient. If we can copy any ideas from them to reduce increasing disparity in income across our population, especially for the B40 segment. I guess the B40 segment disparity here, Inche Wong may refer to the gap between 2 other groups, probably B40 and median 40, and then B40 and a top 20. So probably it refers to the disparity that is enlarging. I think there's a graph that you show just now between top 20 and the bottom 40, disparity through time. Yes, the one on the right. You can see the gap is increasing. So the question is about what are the best practices we can copy from other countries who perform better in Gini Coefficient than us. Let's say top 5 performing countries. What have they done right that we can copy? We can probably benchmark or adopt so that we can also, close this gap between the B40 and the top 20, perhaps between and a median as well. Yeah.
Okay. Before I comment on that, I guess when we talk about issues of poverty and income inequality, and I guess in many other criteria as well, there is no direct comparison with other country. The fact that our situations or our conditions are unique to us. The issues that we have are quite unique, and obviously there are differences in which does not allow us to make that direct comparison. But if I want to answer that question more easily, then I can say, hey, I look at this progressive tax system. The best country in the world have a maximum income tax rate of 50%. Let's go and implement that, because we are below 30%. So let's tax the rich. Let's tax the top 1% or the top 0.1% more. That would be a very so that would be a very a very simplistic answer. But obviously, but to me, this is something we should be seriously looking at if we are serious looking at income inequality. But I think more generally, in terms of our approach, to me, it's important that many countries have now adopt what they call evidence-based policy making, meaning that whatever policy that is being implemented or initiatives, it must be based on evidence, must be based on data, rather than just mere assumption. Because that is quite a common issue in policy making, where there are many assumptions. For example, you assume that when you give bantuan sara hidup, people will be better off. You assume that when you give certain subsidy, say diesel subsidy to fishermen, then fishermen will be better off. But that is assumption. But what is the evidence? For example, if the country has been giving fuel subsidy, diesel, say just for discussion sake, say if the government has been giving subsidy to a certain sector for many years, what is how efficient has it been? How effective has it been? What is the measure? Because that measure, what is the data to show that that policy must continue? Because if you talk to economists, for example, to me, economists don't like subsidy, because subsidy actually distort the market and all that. But obviously, we know that the market is imperfect, and you will need some form of government intervention in terms of taxation, subsidy, and all that. But the more importantly, how measurement. I mean, I think Malaysia has many, for example, many good programs, many initiatives. But equally important, and maybe something that we can improve on, is measurement. How effective, how efficient is our policy? Is it giving the value for money, for the hard-earned people's money? At the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. The revenue of the country is tax. So how much value has it given? And the only way for you to be able to do that is to be able to measure. And to measure means that you have to collect data. Collect data means that you produce evidence, show the evidence that yes, this is working. And that brings me to another approach, which is doing experiments in public policy. Finland government, which is one of the most innovative government in the world, have started to adopt experimental-based approach in their policy making. Starting in 2015, they are already doing that. And what does that mean is that because there's so much that when we for example start formulate certain policy or certain program initiative, there's so much that we know about it. I mean, the fact that we have to make a lot of assumptions about, okay, if we do this, people will do this. If we do this, people will respond to this. If we give this incentive, people will respond accordingly, and therefore no more poor people or less poor people. People will get jobs, things like that. But in reality, we know that it's not working 100%. It's not the most efficient and effective, and that's why the importance of having government must take, to me, I would recommend government to take an experimental approach, and there is a discipline to that. How you do experiment. Experiments means that, for example, if you want to introduce new program, you start small scale. You design for the program properly, design the intervention properly. You measure it, and then see from there before you scale it up to the whole population. For example, you want to introduce free breakfast for children. For example, let's say want to introduce free breakfast for school children, but it's going to be costing a lot of money, right? If you will do it the whole country. So maybe what we can do first, by experimental approach, what you do is just experiment, say, in one particular district in certain state, selected state, maybe one in Klang Valley, one in Sabah, one in Sarawak, one in East Coast, one in northern region, and then you measure how effective is it. How effective? I guess you measure, for example, children are becoming healthier. The fact that you give them free breakfast, and they perform better, maybe they attend school attendance better, perhaps, and hopefully eventually, because they are healthier, then their academic performance will improve. But all this has to be measured, and that's why the importance of experiment. Once you measure, then you start to see, okay, we learn something from, and more important, also as important, is from the experiment you learn what works, what doesn't work, because experiment is all about what works. That's actually a term used by many good advanced government all over the world. They call it what works. What works. Apa yang so, and that is done through experiment. And once you learn from that experiment, then you start to improve from there. Before you think, oh, this before you decide whether to implement it, before implementing on full scale, or whether or not to kind of do a different program because it's not working. For example, based on the experiment, it's not working. And the example, a very clear example is poverty eradication program. They do a lot of experiments. The name of the international organization is JPAL. JPAL is a poverty action lab. Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, which is based in MIT in the US. And they have been using experimental-based approach in addressing poverty all over the world. And the work is pioneered by, if you heard, two prominent economists, Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee. And because of the work and the impact they have in their work in doing experiments to address poverty issue all over the world, they have been awarded the Nobel Economic Prize in 2000. In last year, the economic prize for Nobel went to these three people actually, and Michael Kramer, for experimental-based approach in addressing poverty. And there's certainly areas that we can learn from there.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's an excellent suggestion. So what you're saying is that even though we can benchmark others, we still have to go scientific way. The scientific approach to learn from experiments. So we can tailor what we can do in Malaysia instead of just copy buta-buta. Thank you for that. Let me move on to the next question. Probably the next question can also tap on your expertise. This is about entrepreneurship. It's a question by Mr.
I lose your voice. I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Yes, I cannot hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yes. Now I can hear.
Okay. I think something wrong with the phone. Let me switch the computer. So it's from my side. It's okay. Let me repeat the question by Mr. Wong. The question is about entrepreneurship. Yeah, it says, with the increase of unemployment rates, would you think entrepreneurship would be a good way for youngsters to earn a living? Because working as a Grab or Food Panda is also considered, ways of earning livings. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in my opinion, I'm a strong supporter for people, especially young people, to go for entrepreneurship, and I think it's becoming more important in current age where there's a lot of disruption. There's the job security is not as secure as maybe during our parents 20, 15, 20, maybe 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, people talk about maybe job security, but I think now it's no longer about that. I mean, there's a lot more uncertainty, and therefore there's the justification to promote for entrepreneurship. And if you look at, I think, sustainable development goals also, it also, I think, as when we talk about addressing some of the or achieving some of the goals in SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, I think SDG also promotes social entrepreneurship, meaning that
I see.
you go, yeah, you go for go do business in the world, be an entrepreneur, but at the same time be a responsible entrepreneur. Be responsible to the environment, to the planet. You don't want to be, polluting the river and causing the whole state to, to lose their water supply, for example. And you want to hire to be more inclusive, to give people decent wage, things like that. So obviously, to me, entrepreneurship is the way forward. We should encourage as much as possible for people to do. But obviously, it's not an easy way. I think if we read, we learn from other people's experience. Obviously, it's not an easy path, but because success rate can be low. Success rate to be an entrepreneur can be low. But certainly, if it can be a very rewarding job to do if you do it right. And that's why it's important to do it when you are young, because when you are young, our young people can they have more energy, they have more, they can go through the ups and downs, because businesses will have to go through cycles of failures, and from failure you can learn, and and all that. So and therefore you have longer time compared to, for example, if you're already in your 40 or 50, it may be it's not, you can still do business, but it's maybe too late. You don't have the time, as much time as people who are younger, where they can still go through the cycle.
Yes, I agree. I think the only hope that we have for the young entrepreneurs, when they are successful next time, don't just hire cheap workers. Otherwise, you will make the whole cycle begin again. When the race at the bottom, we cannot rise as a high value, high income economy. So hopefully they will learn from us and not to repeat the past cycle.
Yeah.
All right. Let me move on to the next question. There are a lot of questions. It's not finished yet. I think, okay, the next question is from Yu Peng. Would you think the income tax in Malaysia was set as it is, meant to encourage more spending? So do you think the income rate that we have, the income tax rate that we have in Malaysia, was set such that we, would spend more? It encourages spending.
I think that's
maybe I can. Sorry, before you answer, let me read the same question from Yu Peng again, because I think this is probably a follow-up and probably it connects to the last question. How about income tax rate for other countries in Southeast Asia? I think you shared the income tax rate for the European countries. I think now the question is about comparing income tax rate to Southeast Asia over here, and our income tax rate. Does it encourage more spending?
My personal opinion, I think so to a certain extent, yes, because there has to be a balance between tax rate and the disposable income that people have, and it become more important for the lower income groups, because if you tax them more, then they have less money to spend. So whereas isn't it? That's why a progressive tax rate, income, put higher tax to the top income earners, because even if you tax them more, they still can spend, rightly.
Yes.
Yeah. So so that's I agree with the comment that yes, to a certain extent we want people to have, especially the lower income group. The lower income group, they will spend, because that's the money they have. They have to buy food, because you know that the highest cost
most
is
of their income are spent on spending.
Highest portion of expenses are on food or house in Malaysia. So like it or not, they will have to spend. I mean, because of the fact that they just have enough to live on. So for many people. So yeah.
Can't even talk about wealth anymore. Can't even get over the income hurdle.
Yes. And the second part, I only see Singapore. I only see tax rate for Singapore. I didn't see for other Asian countries because I think in fact, Singapore is also about same position with us in terms of income inequality. So I didn't.
Right?
Yeah, so I didn't look into Singapore when it comes to income tax rate. I didn't because they're not better off any, even though they are very income inequality, they are just on par with Malaysia.
Okay. Okay. I think that's okay. I think the question is about getting your opinion. Let me move on to the next question. Probably two more. Do you think, don't you think Malaysia has the best public education and healthcare system in the world? It's nearly free. So I think it's just probably an opinion whether you agree or not that we have the best public education and healthcare system in the world. I think this ties in with what you talked about in the near term and the long term solution for Malaysia. You know, if we rely on just monetary giving, it's probably not going to solve a long term issue. I think the long term issue, I think, still has to go back to the education and healthcare. I think that's why Yu Peng is asking this question. Don't you think we have the best in these two systems?
I guess when we talk about education, it's not only about free education. Obviously, that is important, free education, but that's the equally important, or probably more important, is the quality of the education. So, yes. So it's a combination of both. I think we know there are various ranking about education, be it in terms of PISA ranking for education. So we know we are. We even though maybe in recent year we have improved, but we know that we are still far behind in terms of we are still behind compared to some other emerging countries like Vietnam or certain other countries on PISA ranking for our school children. Yes. So that's one side of it in terms of quality. And if another part is if you look at university ranking, you look at be it QS university ranking or Times Higher Education, THES ranking, you see where Malaysia is. I know, for example, University of Malaysia is in the top 100, but certainly we are not in the top 50. We are not in the top 30. We are not in the top 20. Because why university education is important? Of course, primary education is important, but education, university or higher education institution not only train our future workers, our future graduates, engineers, lawyers, business owners, entrepreneurs, scientists, and all that, but university also the biggest institution that does research. And you see that many advanced countries, if you want to go to high value added economy, you must be strong in research. I mean, there's no way you can go to high value added economy if you're not strong in research. Otherwise, it's just a consumer of technology. Yes. So and so that's I think that's you know, my indirect answer to obviously there are rooms or areas for improvement, and that's why I think for example, yesterday we hear about education, right? Our webinar yesterday is about expenditure on education.
From
Shahidi. Yes, yeah. So
yes, and according to him, we're not doing that bad. We are probably around the median when it comes to comparing with other nations. So I think what you have answered is not indirect. I think it's very relevant. Not to look at just this dimension, but there are other dimensions, like Shahidi also pointed out, like what you just said. You know, it's not just on the numbers, but the quality of the education that we give. Here comes the last question from Yu Peng. This question is more like a comment, so I'm also trying to interpret it. Let me read it out to you. I think this question follows the last one. A slide before this. A slide before this, with the Gini coefficient and redundancy cost. I have difficulty trying to interpret the whole question a slide before this with the Gini coefficient and redundancy cost. A slide before this. So if we can move back to a slide before this, and there's no question after that, I hope you paying, if you're listening, can you follow up with perhaps specifically what you want to ask about a slide before this?
This one, is it? Is it this one?
I believe so. I believe so. It's not specific yet. You think if you're on the line, please shoot your question more specific so we can understand what is it that you're asking. The slide before this with the Gini coefficient and this. I think this could be a follow-up questions from the last question, asking about the opinion on best education and healthcare. I'm not sure. But let's give some time to see whether he or she will ask. But otherwise, those are all the questions for today, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Confirm. Yes, those are all the questions for today. I think this is a very well covered, particularly well covered topics about Gini coefficient, about your findings and research on the drivers and what we can do. Thank you again for that.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
There's no questions coming in. So well, I'm just trying to give a little more time for this person to give in questions. But otherwise, I think today is a good day to listen to all these informations. If there's no further questions coming in, we can possibly consider concluding the webinar for today. Thank you again, Mohammad. You have given us a lot of points to ponder. I believe these points will be particularly helpful for the policymakers and for the government agencies to think about what we can do differently going forward. Like you said about the tailoring approach on experimenting. Thank you again to our viewers for today. Thank you for all your questions. These are very helpful in clarifying the information that we're sharing. There are a lot more webinars like this that will be happening, so stay tuned. But until then, let's conclude this webinar. Shall we, Encik Mohammad?
Yep. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Encik Mohammad. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you guys again. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.